Hello there once again, fellow peregrinos. Welcome to episode 37 of El Camino de Santiago Pilgrims podcast, where we talk about planning, preparation and packing for walking the road to Santiago, as well as tips, tricks and hacks to make your journey along the way a lot more enjoyable. This week we have an interview with an American pilgrim. It's Peter Gudmundsson. Welcome to the podcast.
I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much for volunteering an hour of your time as well, Peter. Now, I know in our pre-interview chat, you've told me you've already walked one of the Caminos. Would you like to tell the viewers which Camino that is that you've walked?
Yeah, absolutely. It was the Route Française, the French way, the standard one that you hear so much about, and that was in the fall of 2017 from Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port to Santiago.
And how did you first hear about the Camino, and why did you decide to walk it?
Well, it's sort of two separate things. I mean, I've all my life been quite a Hispanophile. I studied Spanish language, even though I'm very much an intermediate Spanish speaker even today. But in college and university, I spent a semester in Cordoba in the south of Spain, and just fell in love with Spain as a whole. Separately, I always grew up a big hiker, a big Boy Scout, hiked a lot in the eastern U.S., Appalachian Trail, that sort of thing. Not the whole thing, but segments of the Appalachian Trail and other trails in the eastern U.S. And so I put those two together. I started becoming aware of the Camino in modern times. I was aware of it historically, but maybe 15 years ago. Just started reading books, and I've read probably 10 or 12 titles of peregrinos who've walked the way in different manners.
Okay, so it's the Camino Frances you've walked, and you said you were already doing quite a lot of hiking. You were an avid hiker. I'm imagining where you live right now, which is come up as Dallas, Texas. Is that correct?
Yeah, Dallas, Texas, which is not a great place to hike.
I was going to say, yeah.
Been in Dallas for about 25 years now. I call it flat, hot, and ugly, but a great place to live.
And very, very dry.
But not a great place for hiking, no.
So how do you scratch that hiking itch down there in Texas?
I have to downgrade the word hiking to just mere walking. And so I do walk. I mean, we do have parks and lakes and area. It just tends to be kind of flat. But yeah, here in the city, which is really, for those who aren't familiar with America or Texas, it's more of a Californian sprawl type of urban plan. And so first of all, when traveling, I seek every opportunity to hike. I go to Iceland a lot, where my family's from, and or to the eastern U.S. I still have family there, and hike a lot when I get a chance. But here, just walking, just urban hiking, urban walking, just to pick a destination on a map and go walk 10 or 15 miles on a Saturday is a lot of fun for me.
So you get your steps in that way.
Exactly.
In the urban jungle.
It is.
Okay, so in episode 27, we had a Canadian pilgrim called Pascal Augier, and he said that the three most important things to get right are your backpack, footwear and socks. Now, I didn't put this question in our pre-interview crib sheet, but I thought because you are an experienced hiker, you might be able to help out those who haven't got so many miles in their boots. So how did you choose your backpack, your socks and your footwear? And would you have any advice for those who might
I'll do it in reverse. Yeah, there's an old saying that happy feet make for a happy person, and feet are critical. I was also a U.S. Marine field artillery officer, but I was attached to the infantry for a long time, so I had a lot of miles or kilometers, more precisely, in a military setting as well. And we all were trained from a very early point to take care of your feet. So high-quality socks are critical. Merino wool is where I've had the best luck. And it's also carry plenty of socks, at least 4 pairs, one on your feet and at least 3 more to cycle through washing and drying. I'd go through 2 or 3 pairs of socks a day, just always keeping them dry. I had good luck with low hiking shoes, meaning below the ankle. Here on the Camino, earlier in life, I had more substantive hiking shoes, hiking boots. That was sort of the style in the 70s and 80s when I came of age with my hiking. It's sort of out of style now. If you see Reese Witherspoon in was the Wild movie, you'll see those 90s hiking boots. that gave her a problem in that movie. But anyway, so I think I use Oboe's Firebrand too, and they're very, very successful. And I'm sure we'll talk about training and preparing, but getting the shoes right is absolutely critical. The backpack's also important, but frankly, the weights carried on the Camino are not that great. That doesn't matter quite as much, or it didn't to me. But backpacks are very simple. Just what size do you need, and make sure it fits properly. A lot of people think a backpack is a backpack, or maybe it's simply gendered as male or female. But go to a good hiking store if you can get access to it, and a good sales clerk there can help you fit properly. Or watch their YouTube videos about backpack fit, but make sure it sits on the hips and the shoulders properly. It's also just a very personal thing. Try on a bunch of different ones. And a good backpacking store, like here in the States, we have something called REI, Recreational Equipment Inc. Places like that will generally have weights, sacks of weight that they'll put in the backpack, and you can walk around the store and get a sense of proper fit on the backpack.
Wow, that is like the Camino Planning 101 right there, Peter. Thank you very much. I'm just going to go over as many of those points as I can that I did my very best to keep up with you. So your socks were merino wool socks. You certainly know your stuff. You carried with you 4 pairs, and you said you had, you went through sometimes 2 to 3 pairs per day. Hence they're carrying 4 pairs with you, and you like to use low hiking shoes, so ones that go below the ankle, I guess, so that doesn't rub on your ankle and your upper and your lower leg while you're walking, right?
Exactly, and they're lighter because a bit of weight on your foot is like a orders of magnitude more than that same amount of weight on your back.
Oh, fantastic! That's excellent advice. And you also mentioned, to choose your backpack, an idea would be to go to Recreation Equipment Incorporated. Is that what it's called?
Yeah, it's called REI for short. Yep. They're in most American cities. It's a co-op out of the Seattle, Washington State area. I don't think they are in Europe yet, but I'm sure there are comparable high quality stores. But you'll hear this, and I've heard this on other podcasts on your series, that you don't want to economize when it comes to shoes. Economize on anything else. Go hungry for a day if you have to, but don't go cheap on. And then that's not to say that more expensive necessarily is better, but you have to try different solutions. And that's the thing about footwear in particular, whether it's the socks. Like, for example, I wear single wool socks. Many people swear by having 2 pairs of socks, a thin liner, and that. Others like, I think they're called Right socks, with a W, starts with a W, Right socks, that are 2-ply. I mean, there's two levels of material built into one pair of socks. They never quite worked for me. I found that they pinched and doubled over and didn't work, but it might work for somebody else. So it's a very personal thing, and that's why I know we'll talk about physical preparation, but a big part of the physical preparation is really a shakedown of trying different combinations. Actually taking notes. I went on a walk. Here were the conditions. I felt like I sweated too much with this, or I got a hot spot here on that, and be really systematic about understanding which shoes work best. I've also heard on your podcast and talked to hikers over the years and pilgrims that some people swear by sandals. Some people swear by, I even saw a very hippie-ish looking fellow on my Camino walking barefoot.
Me too. Me too.
So there are all types. It really is, the old saying, hike your own hike or hike your own Camino really applies to footwear more than anything else.
Exactly. Excellent advice there. And I think the moral of what you said there really is, if you do have the luxury of time to try stuff out, try out different equipment, during your training, your pre-Camino training, that's the best case scenario. And you did allude to training a little bit there. Any training tips, advice you can give people to get in shape?
Yes, I mean, there's really sort of 3 aspects to getting in shape in my view. One is just sort of cardiovascular, just the breathing and heart and all that, and especially as you get older, just being aware of that. So that's a matter of getting miles in. Related to that is the muscular aspect, just getting your legs and hips moving and used to a lot of miles. And the third is that feet toughness, if you will, just figuring out what works, what doesn't, that shakedown aspect, which is gear oriented, but also just plain getting your feet toughened up, if you will, and getting used to where the calluses develop and all that sort of thing. So there are many different methods for doing that. I think getting a lot of miles in. I was not so wrapped up about carrying a pack during that time. I figured that would again, the weights that most people should be carrying on the Camino are just not that great. I mean, it's I'm using English measurement, but 20 pounds or what's that, 10 kilos or something. It's not that much that you have to worry that much about it unless you're overpacking. Because you're not typically carrying food, you don't have to carry a lot of water, maybe 2 liters just to be safe, depending on the time of year. So you don't have that much weight on your back. It's really all about the feet and the legs, I think.
Okay, so you mentioned 3 main parts of training there, which was the cardiovascular, the CV, which was trying to get as many miles in as possible to make sure your heart is ready for for being on the road for 8 hours a day. The muscular aspects are making sure that the leg muscles, the joints and everything's supple and it's not too much of a shock to the system. And the other thing you mentioned was the toughening up of the skin on the feet. And it's funny you say that because I can't remember who it was, but we had a previous podcast guest and she advised anyone that might want to get a pedicure these days, it's not just the ladies, that they don't have a pedicure before they go. They save it until afterwards because that softens up the feet as well. So that's agreeing with your advice there. And I know you said you started your Camino in Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port, and I'm guessing that might not be the most easiest place to get to from Dallas. And we have 51% of our podcast listeners who are in the United States. So any advice you could give on how to get to that starting point, the most common point for the Camino? Yeah,
it was actually not hard at all. We do you fly to Paris. I mean, in our case, we're lucky. Dallas is actually the third busiest airport in the U.S., or used to be before the virus hit. And so it's very easy to get to Paris. And from Paris, it was a short hop. Actually, it was Hop Airlines to Biarritz, and then it was a little shuttle bus from there. So very easy to get there. I know others will fly to Madrid and then train to Pamplona, and then I think it's a bus to Saint-Jean from there. There are different ways of doing it, but no, it's really quite easy.
So basically from the United States, if you can get to Paris direct, that would be great, or indirect. And from there, you can get a connection to Biarritz. And then many people have spoken of taking the Express Burrica or I think there was like a regional train as well that goes via Bayonne. So American pilgrims and indeed anyone that might be looking to start in Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port, if you can get to Paris, then you can probably make your way there. So thanks for that advice, Peter. And so I know that you sound very educated and very knowledgeable on preparing your body, and you did mention the socks, which would be a massive part of caring for your feet, and you mentioned about keeping up the skin on the feet tough. Any foot care routines that made you keep blisters at bay?
Yeah, for me, a couple things. One is just this, and this is another thing I learned in the military a long time ago, is listen to your feet. As soon as you don't try to tough out a situation. If you feel anything, stop and check it out. It could be something as a little pebble in your shoe, all the way to a blister starting to develop. It's easier to prevent than to treat a blister. So and that includes, especially in the first couple of days, just maybe it's half an hour or an hour after you start walking, stop, and even if everything feels fine, stop and inspect your feet. Just to make sure, because there's also a lot of trial and error in how tightly you lace your boots. And there are even videos on YouTube on different lacing techniques. I walked with a friend later in the Camino and she was having some trouble with blisters, and I recommended that she that night check out some videos, and it helped. She tried a different lacing regimen. Most people lace their boots without just sort of crisscrossing without thinking much about it. The second thing is I'm a big believer in dry feet. And so I use powder on occasion on a very hot and sweaty day, and just make sure the feet are dry. The socks are dry. Again, that's why I carry so many pairs and try to dry the pair that was just on the back of the backpack. All those things. Now, that said, there are those that swear by the wet approach, the Vaseline or various other anti-blistering creams that are available in hiking stores. That's not my style, but that does work for other people.
Okay, so just to run over the main points from there, what we're talking about is stop and inspect. So if you feel a pebble or a hot spot, stop and check what's going on, because in your very wise words, it's easier to prevent rather than treat blisters, and you're an advocate of dry feet. When you say powder, do you mean talcum powder?
Talcum powder, or there's actually foot powder, which is probably the same thing, just marketed differently. But right. It's foot powder. In the States, you can get it at a pharmacy, just like a Dr. Scholl's. And I think I saw them in the Farmacias in Spain as well.
And why do you believe more in dry feet rather than doing that, shall we say, rather than putting Vaseline on your feet, which personally I've found works really well for me?
Yeah, it just simply does work for me. I don't know. I should probably do a controlled experiment and try the Vaseline method sometime. It's just, I think part of it, the Vaseline just feels kind of icky and slimy.
Right,
and
yeah,
so,
true. That's true.
Maybe I'm just used to the dry, and there's something about the tactile sensation of high quality wool directly on skin. But I don't know. It just works for me, so I don't question it.
And your feet will definitely smell a bit better as well with the talcum powder. So that's another advantage. And there was another thing you mentioned there about lacing techniques. Would you please, if you don't mind, if you can, explain one lacing technique, give an example of how and why that works?
Yeah, so I use a simple, a pretty much standard crisscross method, little X's up and down the foot. But there are other methods where the laces sort of go along the side of the feet, almost in parallel, and don't cross till later on, making it more sort of loose on the top of the foot. And there are other methods as well. And there are people, again, like I said, YouTube is a great place to find people who really study this more carefully than I do. But they'll describe different methods, and people have different shaped feet, and sometimes they have little neuromas or protrusions of some sort. Sounds kind of gross, but on people's feet. And so different methods work. And then regardless of which type of lacing technique is used, the degree of tightness matters. Like I find that a very tight lacing really helps. And in fact, sometimes when I just sort of forget about it in the morning, I'll just sort of loosely tie my shoes. And within a few hundred meters, I'm thinking, there's something not quite right, and I will stop and more tighten up my boots, and I feel a lot better. But that's me. Like I said, there are as many different techniques as there are people. That's why there's no substitute for experience and just trying different things.
Okay, so the crisscross method is your personal choice, and tight lacing. I guess that means there's not as much movement, then that would create friction and create blisters.
Right. And then I know, and a lot of people, you'll see this a lot in Camino literature and on podcasts like yours. Most people recommend going up a half a size or a size in boot. I know I did. I normally wear a US 10.5, but I went to an 11. And that worked really well, especially on the downhills where you need a roomy toe box so your foot can slide forward a little bit, but not too much in the boot when you're going downhill. But yeah, it's really there are different ways to get there, but the destination is the same, and that's a comfortable foot.
And like you say, it is a personal preference thing, and it's all about trial and error. And if you can get these trials and errors in during the training phase, then you'll be all the better for it. That's some stuff we've not heard on the podcast yet in 36 episodes so far, Peter. So thank you very much for enlightening us and give us a different point of view.
Good. It's hard to be unique these days.
Let's switch gears a little bit now and talk about albergs. What was your favorite alberg on the Camino? Well,
this might be shocking, but I didn't stay in albergues.
Okay.
I actually stayed mostly in some that had private rooms, but I stayed in private rooms in hotels, bed and breakfasts. I figured it out. It was probably about a $2,000 premium over what I would have paid for albergues along the way. But as I said, I was in the military. I've done the big squad bay with lots of snoring guys. Been there, done that. I had no macho need to prove myself. And although I very much enjoyed the social aspects of the Camino, I found that just walking and sitting at cafes, I met plenty of people and developed Camino families of my own as it was. So I would answer the question as some of my favorite hotels.
Yeah, go for it. Please recommend one.
For by personal choice or for budgetary reasons, those who prefer the albergues, I still recommend the occasional hotel just to get a good night's sleep. And some of them, the historical hotels along the way are fantastic. Like in Santo Domingo de la Calzada, there's a Parador right by the cathedral. And a Parador, for those who are new to Spain, is a national historical hotel, owned by the government, and many are actually, interestingly, along the Camino, or former refugios. I mean, they were used as refuges for Camino pilgrims back in the Middle Ages or the early modern period. And they've been converted into modern hotels, and they're not crazy expensive. I mean, by a U.S. standard, where we might be used to, I don't know, $100 for an average hotel on the side of a freeway somewhere. It's about the same cost for these luxury hotels. There's also the Parador it's called the Hostal de los Reyes Católicos, right next to the cathedral in Santiago, is also spectacular. It was built by Ferdinand and Isabella in the late 1400s, specifically to house pilgrims arriving in Santiago, and now it's a modern but very historical hotel. So places like that. There's a hotel right next to the cathedral in Burgos called Hotel El Maison del Cid, and it's spectacular. It had a view right on the cathedral, and so many great choices. I mean, whereas an albergue might cost 10 or 12 or 10 or 15 euros to stay, you can go for 30 or 35 euros to a very clean, nice, one-star hotel in a lot of these little towns. Meet great people and not risk bed bugs and not have to hear anyone snore.
Yeah, there's certainly positives and negatives, and
yes.
I would totally agree with you that every now and again it's good to stay in your own room if you've got the luxury that your budget will stretch that far to get a good night's sleep, maybe a little bit of privacy if you feel like you need it after a few nights in bunk beds and dorms. And I was trying to keep up with you, jotting down as you were speaking. We got the Parador Santo Domingo de la Calzada, and in Santo Domingo de la Calzada, and that's a Parador hotel. And you mentioned one in Burgos, which I couldn't quite
the hotel El Maison del Cid.
Okay, is that CID?
CID, yeah, the warrior, sort of outlaw, a national hero of Spain back in I think it was the 1100s.
And the last one you mentioned was the one in Santiago, which is in the
the Reyes Católicos. Yeah, the Hostal de los Reyes Católicos.
Is that the one where they give is it a free meal for pilgrims? I can't remember if it's.
I don't think so. That one was a little pricier than most.
Right.
Didn't seem like there was too much free there. Right. But another one actually that comes to mind is the in León. There's one called the Hotel Colegio San Isidro, and it's also a former monastery, probably about 400 or 500 meters from the cathedral in León, which is also spectacular. And they don't give anything free, but they do give free tours a couple times a day. If you meet in the lobby, they'll tour the historical rooms. And actually, I believe there are still a few monks who still live there. So it's a weird combination of probably a 3-star hotel and a monastery. There are 7 or 8 old monks who are still there. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah, I'm intrigued as well that you mentioned about the fact that you still felt you found your Camino family. Because I found that one of the harder things about when we stayed in a hotel is that I kind of missed the fact that I wasn't maybe I felt a little bit that I was shortchanging myself and my wife on our last Camino, that we weren't being able to socialize as much. I felt like I was missing out, but you didn't feel like you were missing out.
Yeah, I really, of course, you don't know what you don't know, but I felt like I didn't. First of all, in the breakfast room in the morning, if they serve breakfast, and not all of them do, you very often would meet other people that way. And also, I found just on the trail, just on the Camino walking, I mean, one of the techniques that I had read about beforehand, but was really helpful, was and I tend to walk somewhat quickly. If I pass someone or encounter them on the trail, of course, it is standard to say Buen Camino as a courtesy, but to then follow up with Buen Camino and then with a good morning in English. And like I said, I can speak intermediate Spanish. So I would do a Buen Camino and throw in a little bit of Spanish, like a ¿Qué tal? Or something, how you doing? And then good morning. And that would signal in very quick terms that I could get on a little. If they had bad English or they could tolerate my bad Spanish, we could communicate. So by doing that, that would very often start conversations a lot more. So, and plus, of course, just in a cafe, just not to be afraid to, if you don't want to creep anybody out, but you could sit at the next table and start talking, and then ask them to join you, or things like that. Or someone comes out of the bar holding their café con leche or whatever their bottle of water, and you just say, "Hey, you want to join me?" And very often people are welcome for that. If they avoid it, let them go.
Yeah, I think for you Americans, you're a lot more open. You're a lot better than us Brits. We're a bit shyer, a bit more conservative. So,
well, you need to be introduced.
Yeah, we need to be more like you guys, I think. We kind of sit in the corner, kind of doing our best, to shyly make eye contact with people.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that is true. It could be an American thing. It's also, I think, a mindset of realizing that this occurred to me very early on. You'd walk with someone for an hour or two, never learn more than their first name, but know all sorts of personal secrets about them, knowing that you will probably never see them again, ever. Or you're going to have dinner with them the next night. You don't know, but there's a liberation in knowing that you don't know who they are. I mean, it's not my style, but you could use a fake name if you wanted. No one would know, and the odds of running into them again are fairly low. So that's very freeing.
Yeah, that's quite funny that the ice gets broken, and then pretty soon, much more than in normal life, you're straight to the deeper meaningfuls with people that you hardly know, and that's one of the extraordinary barriers that the Camino breaks down. And one of my favourite things, certainly, about the Camino. And shifting gears once again, I'd like to jump into. I'm really interested to hear your answer to this, because it sounds like you've got your packing down to what you optimally need. Your three most important things on your backpack, aside from the obvious, which will be your backpack, your socks, and your shoes.
Yeah. Well, number one is rain gear. And this is almost a superstitious thing, and I'm not a superstitious person, but have good quality rain gear, which for me is a rain jacket, a Gore-Tex rain jacket, and Gore-Tex rain trousers or rain pants. And I had hardly any rain. I think 3 or 4 days of rain in the entire 33 days of walking. And I believe that the better your rain gear, the more likely you are to ward off the rain. If you forget your rain gear, that's when it's going to rain. It's kind of like, speaking of being English, it's kind of like being in Britain, just take your umbrella, because if you take it, you're not going to need it. And if you don't take it, you are going to need it. So rain gear is number one. The second thing I mentioned is either a paper or a Kindle, or software. For me, a Spanish grammar book, believe it or not. I found an old school book. I found it very useful because to me, I was always thinking, if I overheard Spanish people speaking or saw a sign in something and I didn't quite understand it, I wanted to understand what it was. So even though there's a little bit of weight in that, I find that useful. In my case, it was on an iPad that I carried so I could blog. And but I think some some attempt at, and like I said, I'm not very good at languages, but I'm very interested in languages. And I think part of the Camino experience is trying to make an effort. The one thing as an English speaker I was a little grossed out by sometimes, when you'd be in a bar or a restaurant along the Camino, and an English speaker would just come in and just start speaking English to the folks in there. I always found that enormously rude. I always think it's very important to, and this is not a cut on any one. I was pleased to observe that Americans were no worse than any other Commonwealth English speaker, but I think it's very important to at least say, at a minimum, learn how to say, hablas inglés, or if you can't even do that, excuse me, do you speak English in English? Just some attempt at that. So I think the Camino experience can be enriched by, even if it means learning 20 words, making an attempt at language. And the final thing I would say is a key item is thinking through photography. So whether that's a nice camera, a good camera, or these days a phone, but think through what is your photography strategy. Now, some people don't want to take pictures. They don't want to stop and pose. Some people carry selfie sticks at the other extreme. Not my style. But to think through what sort of pictures do I want to capture? Like, for example, in retrospect, I wish I had taken more pictures of some of the people I had met. I took a lot of pictures of historical sites and beautiful vistas, but not enough of some of the people I met. That would be a nice memory to have had. But to think through, how am I going to take pictures? How am I going to upload them to the cloud? How am I going to share them with friends and family back home? In my case, keeping a blog was very helpful, and I'm very grateful. I'm happy that I had done that, because now I printed out the blog into a book, and now I can go back and refresh my memory and relive the experience more carefully.
So the first one you mentioned, thing on your kit list would be good rain gear, so Gore-Tex jacket and pants. Second thing, so you're training your mind as well as your body, would be some kind of assistance with Spanish grammar. And I think that's a great thing. You're taking the opportunity. I mean, I live in a place called Tenerife, which is a Canary island, and it's a tourist island. Well, was until coronavirus coughed all over our parade. But anyway, we get a good 7-8 million Brits visiting here every year. And it's quite funny when I'm in a supermarket and I hear kind of a British person go up to the workers in the supermarket going, "Have you got hair spray? Hair spray?" And it doesn't matter how slowly or loudly you say it, the person's not going to understand. So it's good if you can learn a little bit of Spanish. And I like you. I mean, before I came here, I lived in Barcelona for quite a while, and my Spanish was terrible. And I found it so frustrating not being able to express myself, to talk to people. And it was using one of those very basic Spanish grammar books that I eventually got fluent in Spanish. And it's a lovely place to be, even if you've got a bit of, you've got a foundation in Spanish. It definitely helps you to make connections with the locals. So really nice recommendation on that. And photography, which again, I really, really like at this point, because on our last Camino, my wife, who appointed herself as the photographer, she took loads of photos, and then about a month after we came home, her phone froze and we lost all of the pictures for some strange reason. Actually, I know why we didn't keep the photos, because normally they go straight into the cloud, but we're always on airplane mode on the Camino, so they weren't being saved in the cloud as we walked. So save your pictures as soon as you get home, or if they're not going into the cloud. We were both devastated. We lost all of those photos because she took thousands. And you mentioned your blog, and you mentioned where the listeners can follow you on your blog.
Oh, yeah. It's peregrino.wordpress.com. So Peregrino and then Pedro, just my name, Peter in Spanish, Pedro .wordpress.com.
And what's your name in Icelandic, just out of interest?
Pieter.
Pieter. Okay, that sounds like
yeah. That's one of the reasons my mother named me this. Like I said, my parents met at the United Nations in the 1950s in New York. My mother from Canada, father from Iceland, and they named me and my brothers names that could be translated to a lot of different languages. So Peter is one of them.
We get quite a few Icelandics here on holiday in Tenerife, actually. And they're always very, very nice people, very straight talking, very direct, very open. You know, they come up and introduce themselves. They nearly crush the knuckles in your hands when they shake it. You know, they're really nice people, really, really nice people. So I think we always have a good view of Scandinavians in the UK. So yeah, good stuff. Now we heard about your favourite albergs, or should we say hotels. What about a town, city or village you'd recommend that your fellow pilgrims staying along the way, and why?
Oh, there's so many. I mean, so I divide them into the big cities and the charming towns. I mean, the big cities, in order on the Frances are Pamplona, of course, Burgos and Leon. I think Burgos, all of them are spectacular, but Burgos in particular is a really interesting town. Great little museums. I took a day off there. And I also took a day off in Leon, but I highly recommend that on the city side. And I know a lot of your other guests on this podcast have mentioned Burgos. But in terms of small towns, again, there are so many. One of my favorite is Castro Jerez, which is between Burgos and Leon, and it's there's a castle on the hill. I love castles. The town itself is just sort of a main thoroughfare, but just very charming, and I love the castle. There was another one, actually a couple days out of Pamplona, the town was sort of okay, but there was another little castle on a hill at Villa Mayor de Monjardin.
I've stayed there, yeah.
Yeah, and there's a little castle up on the hill there. Yeah. That's very cool. I had a funny story. I stopped and I asked an old lady in Spanish. I said, "Excuse me, Senora, is there a way to walk up to the castle?" I said, and she replied, "It would be better to drive." I mean, classic small town wisdom, and I just love that line. Looked at me like I was a stupid foreigner, but those are great. And then of course Osabrero, I think, is a charming little town. It felt like it was something out of Asterix the Gaul. Just a really cool little town.
The views from there are amazing as well, aren't they?
Yeah, and I remember we took the scenic route getting there from Villafranca. There's a sort of a mountain route to the right that we took, and it was really good. So, I mean, those are just some, but it's really quite endless. There are so many wonderful, wonderful little towns, and that is one. If I could do it all over again, I probably would have planned for a few extra days and taken some extra days in some of those places.
So you mentioned Villa Mayor de Monjardin, where there's a castle on the hill that the lady said you'd be better to drive to, but not if you're a pilgrim. You're going to walk everywhere.
Exactly.
Castro Jerez as well, Anelise también as well. So that's got another castle on the hill, and that's between Burgos and Leon, which you also would recommend that you stay at, where you took a day off as well. And Burgos and Leon are probably the most common answers I get to this question. Pamplona as well, which is in Navarre. I think that's like the third day in, maybe second day, third day, from Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port, and Osabrero, and you recommend taking that road less travelled, that mountain route up as well. That's the same route I took as well, and I mean, I love the views on the way up, and then when you get to the top, for me, that was like looking out of an airplane window, just looking across those endless green mountain ranges and the ranks of clouds over the top of it, and it's just as you get into Galicia, isn't it?
It is. It's exactly on the border. If you cross the border a few hundred meters before entering the town.
Right. Okay. So now we know about your favourite towns, cities, and villages. What about a specific restaurant where you say people are going to have some great food?
Yeah. Well, early on, right outside of La Rasoaña, before Pamplona, there's a Michelin star restaurant. I'm sounding much posher than I really am, but there's the little bed and breakfast we stayed at. The patron there mentioned that this restaurant was not to be missed. It was called El Molino de Urandiz. El Molino de Urandiz, right outside of La Rasoaña. I can't even do the R's this early in the morning here. La Rasoaña.
That's a good pronunciation. I think that's pretty perfect.
To practice. And that was really spectacular. It's a Michelin star restaurant. Again, not crazy expensive. I mean, I think the meal was, there were two of us, and it was like 60 euros or so each. And really, really a memorable meal. And then the other one I'd mention, in Ponferrada, I went to a Italian restaurant. It was called Ristorante Pizzeria Trastevere. And it's not far from the Templar Castle in Ponferrada. In general, one thing I would recommend is there is, if you do have a little bit of Spanish, here in the States, we have a restaurant reservation website called Open Table that a lot of people use. The Spanish version of that is called eltenedor.es, thefork.es, eltenedor.es.
Yeah.
And some of the nicer restaurants, even mid-range restaurants, are on there, and so you can make reservations and get reviews and so on. I don't quite trust the reviews, of course, because they're trying to promote, but it was a really useful service. And Google Maps is also very good about you can just see ratings for restaurants that are on the way. And most fun is just asking locals, what do you recommend? But having said all that, a lot of the basic pilgrim menu meals usually aren't something to write home about, but I always enjoyed them. I was surprised by the value of a lot of them. 10 or 12 euros for a 3-course meal. You can't go wrong with that. And more importantly, the settings, being able to sit outside was such a joy in a lot of these restaurants when the weather was good.
Okay, now I know the pronunciation on a lot of these establishments are probably tricky, especially as you're early morning over there, and us Commonwealth English speakers, as you say, might not be able to get our mouths to wrap around the vowel sounds and the consonants. But so the one in La Rasoaña was the Michelin star restaurant is El Molino de
Urandiz. Urdaniz or Z.
Perfect.
Urandiz.
And the one in Ponferrada, the Ristorante Pizzeria.
Ristorante Pizzeria
Trastevere. And if you're looking for places to make a reservation or an app, you can look at El Tenedor, which is ELTENEDOR.es. So El Tenedor. We'll put links to all these places on our Facebook page so people can go on there, but just if anyone wants to go on there right away, then you're welcome to go on that. So excellent stuff as always, Peter. Thanks a lot. Now we're going to jump into the quick fire round. So short, sharp, sweet answers will be lovely. So 6 quick fire questions. Here we go. Favorite Camino blog, vlog, book, and or film?
Yeah, I would say on YouTube again, Efren Gonzalez is a Cuban American who has a whole series of walks. He's doing right now he's posting the Del Norte, but he did the Frances a couple of years ago and Francigena, I think 2 years ago. I highly recommend him. Efren, Efren Gonzalez.
Perfect.
Just search for him.
He's been mentioned before as well, so good stuff.
Yeah, he's great. And then a whole series of books. I mean, it must be a category of its own on Amazon, how many Camino books there are. Some favorites of mine are Tim Moore's Travels with My Donkey. In 2004, he wrote the book in 2004, and he traveled in medieval style with a donkey, and it's a hilariously funny approach. Then the other one that comes to mind, Keith Foskett, The Journey in Between. And I'm looking forward to reading your book, Bradley, as well.
Good stuff. Okay, so Keith Foskett, The Journey in Between. I've read that as well. Really, really enjoyed that. I've also read Tim Moore's book as well. I've got to say I enjoyed Keith Foskett's book a bit more because I was always concerned about the donkey on that one. But that's just me and me being a rescue dog owner and always worried about the animal. But anyway, it is a funny book as well. So thanks for that, Peter. Now, let's talk about your favourite food and or drink on the Camino.
Yeah, well, having mentioned so many posh things, actually, it's the simple stuff. What I like more than anything else are the baked goods, just bread in a restaurant. I was sort of on I aspire to, but don't always achieve a low carb diet. And I just threw that all out the window on the Camino. And just bread is fantastic. And then spaghetti bolognese, spaghetti bolognese, I liked a lot, or pizza, or simple stuff like that. But having said all those pedestrian things, I would say another great thing about Spain is every region is famous for some sort of food or delicacy, and generally ask what's sort of local or do a little reading on what's local. Pinchos in Navarra or País Vasco or tapas here and there. Half the time I don't even know what was in them, but it's just good to be a little adventurous and try different things. But that's how I would answer that.
Or the pulpo in Galicia, something like that. Yeah, I know what you mean. The octopus. Yeah. So one thing you wished you'd packed. I'm guessing there probably wasn't anything because you're ex-marine, ex-military. You'd have been on it.
Yeah, it's funny. There really wasn't anything I lacked. I really didn't. There was nothing I missed at all.
Okay, so one thing you didn't need and wouldn't take again. I'm guessing there wouldn't be nothing here either.
Well, I phrased it differently. One thing I didn't need, but I would take again, is a wool hat and gloves. I mean, I started September 28th. So by early November, it was a little cool in the mornings. Beautiful hiking weather, really, in my view. But just to be safe, just like I said earlier about happy feet make a happy walker. Likewise, a hat is how you warm up your body. And so I had a wool hat. I really didn't need it, but I might have. In fact, I had friends that walked with me the last 2 weeks. They went back a year later exactly, and they found they had snow in Osabrero in the end of October. Wow. So you never know. You have to be prepared.
Yeah, I think unless you're walking in the summer, then, I mean, even at altitude, you could need it. If it was any other time of the year, you're probably better off just taking that hat, gloves and scarf, just in case it does get cold when you're at altitude. So great advice there. Thanks, Peter. And what would you say would be one place you wished you'd stayed over? And if you went back again, you'd be like, I'm going to stay there.
I think maybe Osabrero.
You didn't stay over Osabrero?
We spent the night there, but I could have had a second night, maybe taken some side hikes there. That's probably how I would answer that.
Good stuff. And hardest part of the Camino for you?
The end. Just seeing that come to an end. I mean, I spent so much time preparing for it, physically and mostly mentally, doing research and so on. I even have a curious hobby where I enjoy, even on a Saturday or Sunday now, I do what I call sort of map recon, or in British English, map recce of trips. I take like fantasy walks in my head on Google Maps or whatever, and I was just very sad when it was over because it was just such a wonderful experience. And the best tonic for that is organizing thoughts from the experience and then starting to plan the next one. Yeah,
I like the sound of that. We'll revisit that topic in a little while. And also, that's a great thing to do while we're in lockdown as well, just to kind of do it, live the hikes via Google Maps and online. Your favorite thing about the Camino?
I can't narrow it down to one. I would say three things: history, culture, and people. And it was having read so much of that history in that period and being such a Hispanophile, as I mentioned, just a sense, and again, being an American, where you'll see on an establishment fine quality cleaning since 1995, and they're proud of it being old. When you go there and you realize that altarpiece, Queen Isabella might have stopped and prayed at that altarpiece 500 years ago. It's kind of cool. So I love the history, and then the culture, not just the Spanish culture or the various Spanish cultures, I should say, given the diversity of Spain, but also the people you meet along the way. Walking for a couple hours with a Japanese college student or a Colombian young man or whatever. It's just so wonderful to meet people with such diversity. And then, of course, that's the people. So that's my final part of my answer. Good stuff. And I think I might already know the answer to this next question, but I'm going to ask you anyway. A guilty pleasure you may have carried with you? Yeah, an iPad with a little keyboard. It allowed me to do my blog every day, and a little heavy, but worth having. And then also allowed me to do research. I did. It sounds hypocritical, but I did try to disconnect electronically. My phone was off most of the time. And I used mostly, paper, Brearley guide, and that sort of thing. But I did, email the first part of the day, email the end of the day, and then kept my blog and did a little research on where I was headed and, historical articles and that sort of thing. But an iPad.
Well, I would kind of agree with you because, I've always been an advocate of not carrying technology or being connected to the internet or 3G, 4G, whatever it may be. It's a personal preference, as we've said before. But when I travel, if I'm not on Camino, and I think I'll be taking it on my next one, is that perhaps the €50 or $50, whatever it is for you guys, that I've spent on my Bluetooth mini keyboard that attaches to my iPad is possibly the best money I've ever spent.
It is.
Because you can record your journey along the way, and it's just such a convenient thing that it's much better than carrying a whole laptop with you. So I think that may well be my next guilty pleasure on our next Camino, or my next Camino, which my wife is currently planning, Camino del Norte. We're hoping for September sometime. And yours was going to be more or less the same, you said, in our...
Well, yeah, it all depends how much time I get, and I, when I exit my current company, whether it's, if I have 5 or 6 weeks, I'll do the Del Norte. I think it also depends on the time of year that what's available. But I've also, having studied in Cordoba so many years ago, I have a thing for Andalusia in the south, and so to do the Mozarabe from Almeria. Then it connects to Mérida, to the Via de la Plata, and then up to the Santander. That would be wonderful too. And then I have my eye on the Via Francigena from Canterbury or from London in the UK all the way to Rome. That has a big appeal to me as well.
And I guess for the one that you're talking about, walking from southern Spain, Dallas would be the best place to travel, to train for that, should I say.
That's right.
Because the terrain's quite similar.
It is similar. That's right. No question.
Okay, last in our quick fire round, would you, and I didn't ask you this one, but I just thought to ask you because it sounds like you're very organised, a Camino app perhaps, an application that you used along the way or used beforehand?
I used them mostly beforehand. I didn't use them much during the time. I forgot there's one, it's a red icon. I don't remember the name of it. Actually, I can call it up right now. It's the I don't know. Well, it's not telling me, but it's maybe it's Vive Camino.
That rings a bell, actually. I think I've seen their Instagram page. I'll double check that and look that up. And if we find that's the one we're looking for, I'll stick a link to that on our Facebook
I know it's
page.
pretty comprehensive because it's not, there are many for the Frances and there are some that are local, like only to Galicia or things like that. Grans is also good. It's in Spanish, but Grans is grans.com or Granze is very helpful.
Yeah, that's been mentioned before as well, actually, a few episodes of gronze.com. And I think that pulls up everywhere you can stay between each of the stages and tells you exactly how much it costs as well. So
exactly.
Really useful resource, that one. Okay, great stuff. Now, I'd like to go back to your Camino Frances, and maybe you can recall a funny, inspiring or quirky moment or encounter that embodies everything that's good about the Camino. And it could be a story that could potentially inspire someone to walk the Camino that's not sure if they're going to want to do it.
Well, there's so many. Actually, one of them was pretty funny. So for the last 2 weeks in León, my wife met me in León. At one point, I had talked her into doing the whole thing from Saint-Jean, but she admitted that she really didn't want to walk that far. But I talked her into joining me in León, and another couple we know, friends of ours from Dallas, joined as well. So the last 2 weeks, we all walked together. And when we got to the cathedral office in Santiago, listeners may know that there's a cathedral official who, when you present your passport or your credentials showing that you had walked the way, he asks, did you walk for spiritual reasons or for sporting reasons? And she said, is there a third choice? My husband made me do it. And I thought that was pretty funny. He didn't think it was very funny, the official, but I was very proud of her for her wit on that one. Another thing, speaking of finishing in Santiago, another a bit of graffiti. Now, I hate graffiti as a general rule anywhere, but there was one that I saw both in English and Spanish on a mile marker or a kilometer marker after Sarria, and it said both in English and Spanish, "Jesus didn't start in Sarria," which I thought was hilariously funny because it at once in one quick sentence made fun of everyone. It made fun of sort of pilgrim snobs who look down on those who only start in Sarria. And again, for listeners, Sarria is a little over 100 kilometers, and it's where a lot of Spanish youth groups and local Spanish people start the Camino, so they can say they quote unquote did it, but it's only 100 kilometers, 5 days walk or something, and so people who come a longer distance very often condescend to that. But of course, Jesus himself, the historical Jesus, never walked the Camino, so the whole notion that that comment should be made is just very funny to me, and so that was one thing. But yeah, there are really so many that it's hard to generate too many of them.
I think it's an interesting topic as well, the issue of Sarria. And obviously, if you start in Sarria, you've done your 100 kilometers, and you can get your Compostela. For me, it wasn't about whether people started in Sarria or whether they started in Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port. It's just about more the spirit in which people walk the Camino and how considerate they are of other pilgrims along the way. And I just found that actually, the closer to Sarria you got, the more likely you are going to encounter, like you said, some groups, big groups that actually don't tend to. They don't seem as considerate as other pilgrims, those that have walked longer distances. So I think it's important to make the distinction. It's not about whether people start in Sarria or whether they start in Saint-Jean. It's just about the spirit in which the Camino is walked and how considerate people are. Because I did see certain groups in Sarria where they'd be up kind of cooking and shouting and making a load of noise. And you probably wouldn't have experienced this in the hotels because obviously you're in your own room. But in the albergues, there were certainly big groups of people that would be making a lot of noise way past the, say, 10 o'clock, 9:30 curfew. And sadly, that's a more common occurrence the closer you get to Santiago. So I think people just to be maybe aware of what can happen the closer you get to Santiago.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. I think for many, it's just a long weekend trip. Like I said, it's a church group or a youth group. Yeah, it's a different level of festiveness. Yeah,
exactly. And I just want to quickly touch on some money matters as well. I mean, I think you might have some good stuff to offer on this because it sounds like you're very well prepared and well drilled. How did you manage money on the Camino? What advice would you give to those that have never done it before?
Yeah, so I carried two different ATM cards and two different credit cards. I forgot the names of the ATM systems, but the ATMs are pretty, in the larger towns, pretty easy to find. I know you had a guest on an earlier podcast that mentioned in the U.S. there's a brokerage company called Charles Schwab, and Charles Schwab has you can open a checking account that has free international ATM. It's free of fees to use an ATM machine. So ATM is primary, and then credit cards. American Express is not as widely accepted, so Visa or MasterCard. I had one of each just in case, and I also, I paid down, sort of overpaid my account a little bit, so there would be no question if I missed paying a bill on the way or something, I wouldn't get charged any interest.
Okay.
So that was really it. But yeah, quite a few of the smaller businesses prefer cash, and so it is good to have cash available.
Yeah, good stuff. I mean, you mentioned there the Visa and the MasterCard might be better off being taken with you if you're from the USA, because not everywhere takes the that takes the American Express. And it is always good to have a bit of cash as well, because a lot of the albergues or a lot of the small businesses along the way will prefer that you pay in cash. And they often say, like, you got to spend a minimum amount to pay by card. So useful stuff as always. Thanks, Peter. Now, I know you mentioned the hardest part for you about the Camino was actually finishing. And for those pilgrims that won't have walked it before, any advice that you can give on making a smooth transition back to everyday life after such an intrepid adventure?
Yeah, I think I found what's really helpful is articulating what occurred while it's happening and then after. And that's why the blogging was important to me. I've not been a consistent journalist or diaryist. But it is helpful to write down ideas, or thoughts. Why am I feeling the way I'm feeling? For some people, it grows into a book. For others, it's just maybe a long letter to a loved one or a friend, or maybe just a note to oneself. But organizing the thoughts, I think, is really helpful. And a spirit of gratitude. The whole nature of pilgrimage for most people, like we've said throughout this conversation, pilgrimage is a very personal thing, and it's very different for different people. But there is at least one common thread, I think, is that of gratitude. And that's why I one of the theme I had for my entire trip was one of gratitude. For my wife at that time, we just had 30th anniversary, now almost 33 years together, our 4 children.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Peter, I'm just married 6 months ago. What advice would you give to me to survive another 33 years?
Oh, just agree a lot.
I'm doing that already. I'm doing well.
Yeah, pick the right person and treat them well.
I've definitely done that.
Yeah, so
sure.
you're all set. But
good.
But really a sense of gratitude. I mean, every little church along the way I stopped, I said a little prayer of thanksgiving, and then bringing it back to the Camino itself. At the end, there's an old saying: "Don't cry because it's over. Smile because it happened." And having a sense of gratitude, like at the age of, at that time, 53 years old, maybe not mid-career, but certainly the third quarter of the game, let's say, to find the time, to make the journey was, I was grateful for that opportunity and grateful that I had made that decision. So that focusing on gratitude, it ties back very much to what we're all dealing with the COVID situation today, is that no matter how bad you think you have it, somebody has it worse. And so you have to start with a sense of gratitude for what life has given you and what, God willing, life will continue to give you.
So just be happy that you actually got to have that experience, and you might end up shedding a few tears because it's over. And it does, I think, that attitude, sorry to sound very cliche and cheesy here, that attitude of gratitude certainly can help us in the current climate where most of us are stuck indoors. But in actual fact, there are lots of us that have it a lot worse than we have it. And we can only focus on the things that we can do, which is, we can still call a loved one. I was looking at a documentary of some UK war veterans and people that are now grandparents but were kids in the war, and they said they didn't have the chance to do that when 50, 60, 70 years ago during the war. So we're actually, if you look at it in some strange way, if we're healthy and we've got enough food in the cupboards and our loved ones are healthy, then we are the lucky ones. And talking of gratitude as well, Pete, is there anyone you want to just mention, someone you might have met along your Camino de Santiago that you'd like to say hello to and thank them for enriching your experience?
Well, there were so many individuals met along the way. I mean, I did have companionship planned. The first week, I had a childhood friend. We've been friends since we were 4 years old. He lives in Boston, George. He came with me for the first week and had to go back to work after Logroño. And then the last 2 weeks, as I mentioned, we had friends, Gabrielle and Lisa Gonzalez. He's of Brazilian extraction, but American now. And my wife, Kathy, for the last 2 weeks. So I was really lucky. Another thing, I was very lucky. I had 3 distinct experiences, walking with one friend, walking for 2.5 weeks by myself, and then 2 weeks with my wife and another couple. But met a lot of really interesting, fun people from around the world. Like I said, many names I didn't catch or have forgotten, but I enjoyed them all.
Amazing. Peter, I've had more than an hour of your time this morning, so I'll let you get back to hiking that urban jungle. If you can get out there, well, I'm guessing you can't because of lockdown restrictions, but just to extend my gratitude for an hour of your time, for all the help you've given me, for when we go back to the Camino. Fingers crossed it's going to be in September for our honeymoon, and all the recommendations that you've given that are going to help other pilgrims have the time of their lives. And it's all going to be, a massive thanks to you for your help. And please look out in your email for my book. I'm going to send you a PDF copy of that, just to say thank you for your time as well. So, Peter, I wish you for your next Camino, whether it's going to be the one from the south, or whether it's going to be the one between Iceland and Rome, or whether it's going to be the Appalachian Trail or the Pacific Coast Trail. Buen camino, fellow peregrino.
Well, buen camino to you too, Riley. Thank you so much.